Hi there, I'm Francis Potter, Solution Architect with GitLab, and I'm here today to talk to you about the future of DevOps and the importance of right-to-left thinking. This is a talk that I gave at DevOps Day LA in March of 2020, and the video of that wasn't so good, so I decided to just record more or less the same thing at my desk. Hope you enjoy it. I started thinking about this with the question, a very simple question: what does DevOps look like visually? If you could see it, what does it look like? So I went to everybody's favorite resource, Google, and I typed in DevOps and clicked the Images tab. And what I saw was a sea of sideways figure eight diagrams. Every single one of them on their side, almost exactly the same design, with these arrows pointing left to right across the front and then right to left down the back. I decided to investigate a little bit further. And I discovered that these diagrams have a lot of very similar words on them, but not exactly the same words. Some of them have more phases than others, but essentially they have to do with planning, coding, testing, packaging, deploying, releasing, and monitoring your application. And that's sort of that cycle in DevOps. The ones at the bottom actually have tools associated with them. I think it's really funny that this one in the bottom at the middle doesn't have any planning tools. The one on the left is actually from GitLab, so we are not immune to this particular version of what DevOps looks like. So I started to ask myself, what is that right to left flow? I get the left to right flow. I get that you code and you test and you deploy, but what's the right to left flow? And what I noticed is that all of these, including GitLab's, the right to left flow goes from monitor to plan, monitor to plan, monitor to plan. Now, I kind of get that because you're going to monitor your application in production, and then you're going to look at the reports from the monitoring. You're going to see what people are using in your application, how they're using it, where the problems are, and you're going to plan the next release. But somehow that falls a little short to me. A lot of people, when they see monitor, they think of just APM, application performance monitoring. And a lot of times the group that looks at the monitoring reports is a completely different group from the one that's doing product planning. And quite frequently, applications aren't really instrumented for the kind of monitoring that's useful for product planning. In the current environment, DevOps is more important than ever for several reasons that I'd like to touch on before we start to address this question. The first is that all companies are software companies. Whether you're in transportation, healthcare, entertainment, it doesn't matter. Every company has software development teams working at them. Every company needs DevOps. Every company needs this. This is no longer restricted to just the world of tech companies. Secondly, speed is more important than ever and just gets more and more important. The winners in the future competitive races are going to be those companies that can deliver their software quickly, whether that's internal applications, mobile apps, websites, it doesn't matter. Delivering software quickly is going to be key to competitive advantage in the future, but so is security. With more and more threats and vulnerabilities impacting our software day to day, so many different attack vectors around us and available to us, keeping security first and foremost is absolutely key. And yet, we also still have organizations that are siloed, that are categorized from each other and aren't really communicating with each other across different parts of the organization. So that team that gets the monitoring report might be completely different from that team that's doing the planning, and they're probably separate from the coders and the people running the DevOps pipelines, and they might be separate from the people doing the deployment. How are you supposed to be fast? How are you supposed to be secure? And there's so many different teams, and the communication between them is really tricky and really difficult. Finally, there is a confusing array of different technologies, ideas, and movements in the world of DevOps that can leave us completely confounded even in the modern world and make it almost impossible to think about the future. So those are some of the challenges that we face. So who are the winners going to be? Who are the companies that are going to really win in the long run over the next 5 to 10 years playing the DevOps and software development game? Well, I think the winners have a few specific characteristics. First off, winners measure everything. They become data-driven organizations. No longer are product features, roadmaps, even bug fixes dependent on the hunch of an individual product manager or even a committee. Rather, they're based on data that's gathered in real time from a running application. Gathering data becomes the #1 goal of every organization as you iterate and refine your application to make it better and better. Secondly, we treat our applications as many-headed beasts. What this means is that there's not just one version of an application that does one thing. Your applications integrate with dozens of other applications, and they may look and operate very differently for different users, not only because of preferences and configurational settings, but because you might be testing new features on subpopulations of users to gather data on them before rolling them out to the entire user base of an application. And this is really, really a key idea. This idea that you can segment your user base as a software organization, start acting like a marketing organization, which is always doing A/B tests, always testing out new ideas. That's how software teams have to be working in the future in order to be competitive and really win. Finally, the winning software organizations need to embrace failure. And by this, I mean every time there's any kind of failure, making sure that it's tracked and recorded, making sure that there's a debrief from it, making sure that the action items that are developed as a follow-on to that failure are actually performed so that you prevent that failure from happening in the future. Every company will fail and will fail multiple times. Technically, the winners are the companies that learn from those failures and get better and better as they go on, as they iterate. The last and most important to me of all of these characteristics of winning companies in the future is right-to-left thinking. And that is to take seriously that right-to-left flow in those figure-8 diagrams. It's no longer just monitor to plan. It's a whole aspect of how you think about your software development life cycles. I'm assuming that we have Git. We have good software development practices. We have code review processes. I'm assuming we have continuous integration and continuous deployment. Those are all solved problems. But the tricky part is how are you doing that data collection and how are you using that to drive iteration? So I drew a new diagram that reflects that reality. Now, this diagram of the future of DevOps is really dealing with one module or one feature of your application. Remember, your system is a many-headed beast, meaning that you actually have a lot of different features or a lot of different modules or components or whatever you call them, and each one of those should have this cycle built into it. Step one is to build the minimal version of a feature or the minimal improvement to a feature in every iteration. And I mean not broken, just minimal. It should be documented, it should be tested, it should be working, but it can be very, 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 very small. We've really forced ourselves to do this at GitLab, and it is not easy. If you think that you can just snap your fingers and have the smallest version of a feature, your feature is probably 10 times as big as it actually needs to be. I challenge you to get smaller and smaller and smaller with your features. Sometimes you're releasing versions of features that don't even have any visible functionality yet, but you're able to see how the code performs in production, and you're able to start gathering data on it before you even have a feature to roll out. That lays the groundwork for that feature to be highly performant and of high quality in the future. So once you've built a minimal version of that feature, instrument it for data collection. Be thinking about data collection from the very beginning. And that's not just monitoring data, like how many people clicked on it. That's just where the beginning is. It's also how many people rolled over it. How long did they take before they clicked on it? Can you experiment with the control being in 4 different places on the screen and gather data on which one gets clicked on the most or the quickest? Furthermore, can you gather human feedback, like ask questions in surveys and poll users who are using this feature as to how much they like it, what else they would like to see, how often they might use it, how much money or speed it's going to mean to them, and can you gather that human feedback? Once you've instrumented that feature for data collection, the third stage is to control deployment. Don't roll this feature out to absolutely everybody and absolutely every version of your application, absolutely every server, but use canary deployments and feature flags to control who actually sees this. So if there's something wrong with it, it's really easy to switch back and get rid of it, shut it off. Maybe all you have to do is hit a checkbox. Maybe all you have to do is update one server really quickly. You want to be able to control that deployment. You also want to be able to mix and match because you've got a many-headed beast. You've got lots of different feature teams, each working on different modules. Maybe some users get the new feature over here and some users get the new feature over here and some get both and some get none. And you can see how those interact and you can analyze that data. The fourth step is to plan your next iteration based on real-time data. That data that you're collecting from your data collection from that small group of users should be made available immediately to the team responsible for that feature, whether it's product management, UX design, or the developers, whoever's responsible for that feature. That's not monitoring data that goes to some ops team somewhere else. That's data that's made available immediately so that that team can immediately start working on the next iteration, the next minimal change to that feature. And from there, iterate, iterate, iterate on the tightest cycles you possibly can. The shorter your cycle times are, the more data you can gather, and the more data you can gather, the better your feature will be as it actually grows. And furthermore, you'll have that feature in market, even though it's just a minimal, tiny version of that feature. The end result is that your organization becomes a winner and becomes the most competitive organization in the market with your software at the core and driving the future of DevOps. Thank you very much.